This speaker has been recorded at an online meeting of Addictive Eaters Anonymous. You can email us at contact@aeainfo.org.
On the first Friday of the month, we hold a speakers meeting, and our speaker tonight is Celine.
Thank you, Louise. I'm Celine. I'm an addictive eater. It's good to have the opportunity to do this. Some people have heard my story many times before. I hope it hasn't changed. It's nice to think of of those early days, you know, what it was like for me. And I think I believe I was born an addictive eater. I believe that I was born with addictive disease in every cell in my body, because I was just different as a young child. I remember I'm thinking about when now that I know what addiction is. When I was young, I was always probably quite sensitive, but extra sensitive. I couldn't take the knocks. I couldn't take criticism. Always anxious, always afraid. Never knew what to do. Never knew if the rules were there. Like, for example, the rules at school. Unless I was reassured and told what they were all the time, I didn't know what they were. You know, and I remember even when I started school, not knowing whether I should go home or not, so I just ran home and hid. You know, this is at lunchtime, and then, you know, school people were out looking for me and they don't know where I am. And I remember another time that happened. It was probably several years later, and I was sick and I didn't know how to deal with that at school, so I just snuck off home. And again, teachers are out looking for me, and my mum found me home in bed because I was too ashamed to say that I felt sick. And I was always a little bit on the outside. I never knew how to make a friend at school. I'd sort of be on the periphery of groups of friends and never really confident to be able to kind of, I don't know, make a connection there. I never liked sport or anything like that. I loved schoolwork because then I could really be on my own with it. It was good. When I was a young child, I was very obsessed with boys, and from a really young age, I'm not sure at how old, but I remember at primary school hiding under the hedge, waiting for high school boys to bike past. And there was one particular one, him and his brother. I can't remember which one of those I liked, but this tells you what I'm like as an addict, because I would hide under the bushes, wait, you know, not interested in any other school activities before school, just a boy biking past. And if he didn't come past, I had a terrible day. If he came past, I had a good day, because then I could fantasize the whole day. I don't know what you fantasize when you're a child about a boy. But yeah, so I look back and I just see that that's actually a pattern that continued on. Food was very important for me way back then. You know, I was hiding food and just very fixated around food, and always felt like we didn't have enough. And as I got older, my family situation was such a red herring for me. It was the biggest red herring because both my parents are alcoholics, and so as I grew, and there's lots of family violence, lots of fighting, dad hitting mum and stuff, and just lots of yucky things happening at home. And as I grew up and wondered what was wrong with me, it was a very easy thing to fixate on. But you know, now I know that actually, even if I'd had the most perfect parents in the world, I still would have been an addict, because I was born that way. So yeah, really, really odd about food, hiding it. You don't need to hide it if you've got enough food in the house, but I never felt like we had enough. As soon as I was old enough to steal, I was stealing food. I was lying, compulsively lying, stealing other people's food in the house. but yet I had this thing, because I overate and underate. I have an anorexic mind as well. And we were Catholics, and you had to give up something for Lent, which I think was about 6 weeks. I always gave up lollies, because my grandmother would give lollies. I always gave up lollies, and she'd still give the lollies. And I just hide them in my drawer, and I just get them out and look at them, and then put them back. Same with the Easter eggs. I remember Nana giving us a bag of chips, and they were those big crinkle cut chips, and I would take one out and eat one crinkle and put it back in the bag and save it for later. And so days later, my siblings, some of them who have been here, would be so angry at me because, 3 days later, Celine's bringing out the bag of chips and eating a crinkle and putting it away. And then there was other times when I just binged and and then as soon as I could get hold of, I learned how to steal. I stole from the neighbours milk money and milk tokens, and then I stole from shops. Then I was running away at night, and stealing food and hiding it, getting food poisoning, all of that kind of thing. And I was afraid. I remember, when I was running away, I was so terrified. What do you do, when you're a young kid and you're out, and there's nobody else around, and I was obsessed with boys. I was terrified of boys. I didn't know how to relate to boys. So I always remember this just deep unhappiness, and loved animals. That was kind of it was kind of a thing for me where I could really feel good in a good way. And now I actually think that's a sense of a higher power, actually, with what I saw in animals. But yeah, so destined to come here, because as soon as I could start to earn money, I was eating my money. My first thing that I bought when I got a job was a set of recipe books, and I would sit at home, 15-year-old girl reading recipe books. I never made one recipe out of those books because they're really complicated, and Mum still talks about it now, actually, that recipe I made. But I just love to read books, and that's just so not normal. And so the disease then manifested in other things, and I didn't drink normally either, and I tried to get hold of drugs as well, did a bit of that. And when I got married very, very young, it was all about obsession, obsession with a guy, 10 or 11 months, obsession with a guy, just a customer in the shop I worked at, and he's my husband now. But just that addictive behaviour all the time. And I remember things like having a baby. I've got 3 sons. But when I got married, when I got engaged, when I got married, when I had a child, I loved all those things. When I got pregnant, because it was attention on me, anything to get attention on me. And yet I was a social cripple. I didn't know how to behave unless I was using substances. I couldn't work. I was pie in the sky dreams about what I wanted to do. All this, I'm gonna, but I could never do really anything. And so my husband supported. He supported us. He had bought a house before I met him, and I never took any responsibility for our family, the things. And during all that time, the disease is progressing in me. The way I'm eating, all of these rules around food. When I came here, I wasn't hugely overweight. I lost a few kilos, going on a food plan, but it was this binging and then starving and the rules about food. And I was never, I'm amazed. I remember a woman that was in our program called Amanda, and she used to talk about cooking desserts and watching them in the oven, and I think she'd talk about burning her mouth. But I could never do that. I just cook toast, If it was going to be dessert toast, it was jam, and if it was going to be savoury, it was Marmite. You know, it was just biscuits, toast. Always buy the vegetables, a fridge full of vegetables, and then I'd chuck half of them out. You know, takeaways, spending money shopping, big problem. So, you know, when my husband met me, I had a credit card debt. That was one of the first things he did for me, was paid off my credit card. You know, just totally addictive in every way. And yeah, and as well as that, which, you know, everybody here knows about, is my anger. You know, the restless, irritable and discontent, and just get up in the morning. You know, when I'm a mother, you know, when I came here, I think my youngest, when I first came here, my youngest child, my oldest child was about 12. He's 36 now. And, you know, so I'm a mother of 3 children, and I just hate life, you know, and just a very, very angry person, but also very loving in some ways too. And, you know, still have, you know, I remember my husband saying to me when I came here, he was actually quite angry about me coming here, because he just said, it's just another tangent that you're doing, you know, because I did all the courses. You know, I was trying to fix myself, I don't know, 15 years before I came here, counselling, courses, you know, therapy, you know, some tangent, and he was just so angry because it was going to take me out of the house all those nights a week. And anyway, after I'd been here for a while, and when I got some insight, because I had no insight into any of this, when I got some insight into it, and I just said, I don't know why you stayed with me. He'd been with me for 15 years at that point, and he just said, because when it was good, it was really great, but he said it was getting really not great. And yeah, and so he'd put up with a lot of things that I can remember, so much anger, and him having to try and fix the situation. And you know, I broke windows, I put holes in walls. And this is, you know, me trying to be a loving mother, and then I just lose it and do something, and, you know, the family must have been just living on tenterhooks, you know, all the time. My husband also kind of bought into that red herring thing of having two, you know, my 2 parents that were alcoholics and causing lots of troubles. But it was, if you took them out of it, you know, I was just a train wreck. And I just couldn't manage. And so what happened for me was that I came into AA first, and my brother had said to me, I think you got the same thing as me. And I went to an addiction counsellor, and I told him what I was like, and I never mentioned the food. I never once mentioned the food to anybody ever, because I didn't actually even know. I didn't know that that could cause a mental problem like I had. And he just said, you need to come here. And I remember going back to him about 3 weeks later and said, because I came here and I related, and I rang him up and I said, well, it's not working for me, because now I really want to kill myself. You know, I've been wanting to kill myself for a long time. And he just said, you need to stop coming to people like me to fix you, Celine. I don't know any other solution for what you've got wrong with you apart from the 12 steps. And at that point, I just felt like I had no more energy to try. I just honestly felt like I had nowhere else to go. I didn't want to go to a mental hospital or a prison. And I think that was when I started wanting to come. Still took another 3 years before the food went down, because I thought I wasn't as bad as all of you. I had excuses about why I wasn't so bad and why I didn't have to do things quite the way that you do them. And I remember saying to someone that's in the room tonight, you know, I was trying to justify something, and she said, you don't really need to worry. She said, it'll either get worse or it'll get better. and that was a relief to me. And it got worse. And when it got worse, I knew where the solution was. And I think one of the things, if I'm thinking for new people, is that for me, I initially came and then went away for a few months and then came back and stayed, and that would have been about 24 years ago that I stayed, and I've been coming to meetings regularly since then. When it got to that point of surrender, which was when I really didn't know, and I was prepared to do what everybody else did. I was here in the rooms, and I had a sponsor. People knew me, and I mean, people could tell how well you are. You don't know it yourself. So I was here, and just thank God for that. I finally became honest with other people. So one of my big red herrings was that I'd felt so different my whole life that I didn't want my friends that weren't here to think that I was different. I wanted them to, I was always trying to make myself out to be normal or okay, even though I didn't feel like I was. And when I just started outing myself to my friends and just said what I did, and including the weighing and measuring in front of them, I just started to change. And I think that's where I started to have some freedom from the food. You know, when I was prepared to actually just be an addictive eater and do what I needed to do. So for me, there's so many things I love about this program. I was an atheist when I came here, and yet I love a spiritual program. All of you have taught me that, the literature, and all of you have taught me how to live a day at a time, a spiritual program. And for me, my most favourite thing when I hear people share is when people talk about God, because it's our own conception of a higher power, personal to me. But when people talk about God, I completely relate to that. And you know, so one of the things I really love is that, you know, because we've got quite new people in our fellowship, is that I know that those new people can have as good a day as anyone here, no matter how long they've been sober. It's just that don't pick up the first one, get your head on the pillow, and don't pick up the first one and come to a meeting. And you know, that all of us have a daily program or a moment program. You know, living right in that moment is where I've been given the peace and the freedom. So for me, where the food is now, I do think there's because I'm an addictive eater, there's probably a degree of bondedness always. You know, we've got fruit on our trees at the moment. And for afternoon tea today, I had a very big pear. And if there's a bowl of pears, I'm going to pick the big one, you know, so that's how I know I'm bonded a wee bit. But if the food just doesn't call me, I'm just not interested in it. I was out at lunchtime today with my son and husband and my son's girlfriend, and they all had an Italian meal. And I just loved it. I love the atmosphere of that place. It's our favourite place to go. And I had my cup of tea, but I'm just not interested in the food, and that's a miracle. I would say that the things that I think we always have Achilles heel, and my thing is fantasy still, the fantasy, living in a fantasy world, or that thinking coming in. And I've been taught here, you know, those spiritual tools of, you know, not listening to my thinking, because the problem centers in the mind. So they're not listening to my thinking and just observing it. And if I just do that, it just goes away. And then I can get on with doing what I need to do. So for me, I'd say probably about 3 years ago, my sponsor, I'm so grateful for my sponsor, who knows me very well, and said she felt that there was something that was missing in my recovery. And she told me that for her, it was deepening her spiritual life. you know, enlarging that spiritual life. And so I started doing meditation, and every day. I think that was about 3 or 4 years ago. And I would say in the last year, probably about a year ago, when I had a really difficult situation at work, that became even more important for me. And so there's a lot of stuff that I do around, I don't like to call it mindfulness actually, because I'm not thinking, it's just being in the present. And you know, whenever that troublesome thinking comes in, I just need to start observing my surroundings and live in that present moment, and it goes away. And that's been massive for me. I can even see the shift in myself, and how I am with other people. I would say that it's been a very long time since I have abused anybody. I still make mistakes with impatience, but I just don't have anger. I don't have any problems in traffic or road rage, or I just don't get angry like that. And I'm given the tools here, if things come up to annoy me, that things come up that do annoy me, you know, I have the tools here, which is the pause, you know, the pause and actually try and help someone else. It's probably been the biggest thing that has helped me with my relationship with my husband. We've been together 40 years now. And there's been lots of changes with us both recently. He's retired. And, you know, I've been taught here that, you know, if I've got a problem there, I just need to look for a way to help him. It's very, very easy. Yeah, so the people that I really like being around are the people that see service as important in their lives. And I'm very lucky to have a service job. I've just moved into a leadership role from working on the front line, and the work that I do, I'm now in charge of quite a lot of people. And I see myself as a servant, and I love it. I love it because I can go to work and there's not one moment of my job that I think of Celine, because I just can't do that. And I just really love that, where I can just go around my workplace and see what I can do for other people. It's very good for an addict like me. I have an hour's drive to my work and to meetings, actually, if we were having face-to-face meetings. And for me, that's really important to put something on, if my mind's busy, to keep me focused on the present. I would say, as far as fear goes, fear is always about future, you know, the past stuff that I think I've lost, or the future that I think I should have. And again, for that, just keeping in the present is the answer for me. So the things that have really, really worked for me is meetings, as treatment, lots of meetings. I'm having a difficult time, more meetings. And my sponsor, hugely important for me, but I see it's almost like you know, I know who my sponsor's sponsor is. I know who the other people my sponsors, most of them, I think. And I just know who those people are here. I mean, they're all here, and I just so grateful. So I think that's me. I hope that's the same as the other times I've been asked to share. I'm just very, very grateful for what we're given here, and yeah, out of being desperate because I was going to lose everything. I have a really, really good life, so I'll keep coming. Thanks.